You're listening to Founders on Air with Steve Orenstein and Mike Rosenbaum.
This podcast is sponsored by Zoom2You, Australia's on-demand courier marketplace. Get your parcels delivered within hours rather than days.
Today we have with us Trystan Eeles, co-founder of Liftango. Liftango is an on-demand transport and carpool technology platform. Hey Trystan, thanks for joining us today.
No worries, great to be here. Thanks.
Congrats on what you're building with Liftango. It's another great Aussie success story in the mobility space. And in fact, you guys are based out of Newcastle and taking it to the globe.
Yeah, it's a really exciting time for us. Newey as the home, but the world as the market. So it's one of those funny things, being in such a small sort of town, but having such a global kind of focus is exciting, but also, thing we have to work through from time to time, I guess. Yeah.
Fantastic. Actually, we know a lot of great success stories coming out of Newcastle, our friends at Camplify.
That's it. There's a few of us up there. Yeah, there's something in the water up there. Hunter Water's doing something right. There's a few good stories coming out of Newcastle. Yeah.
I believe the rent's a little bit lower.
Rent's lower, beach is closer, less traffic. There's a load of reasons. Yeah.
I'm there.
Yeah.
All right. Space the team. That's right there. Tell us, what do you do when you're not working at Liftango?
Yeah. So I'm one of those classic cases of just having had kids. So it's funny, all of us three founders have all had kids roughly at the same sort of time, and we've all agreed that it's exactly the wrong time when you're starting a business to have kids. But that's where we're at. So we've all got 2 kids each. So most of the time, to be honest, is spent on that. Bit of surfing, bit of skateboarding. Most of that now focus on trying to get the kids to surf and skate in the future. But that's the kind of thing we all get up to.
So Liftango, is Liftango how you pronounce it? Or
it's one of those, we actually got some advice to choose as ambiguous a name as you're comfortable going with, because that question comes up and then it sort of puts a tick in the person's mind and they're like, is it Liftango? Is it Liftango? Is it, yeah. So we call it Lifty. You can call it Lifty from now if you want. Right. But yeah, Liftango is how we sort of pronounce it.
Liftango.
Yeah,
okay,
Liftango.
Cool.
Yeah. It's a funny one though. It does come up a lot.
So Lifty's your third baby, really?
Yeah, basically. We all have this shared thing, and it probably gets too much attention compared to our actual babies, but that's just the way it goes, right? They're not listening to this, so they won't hear it.
So tell us what Liftango is all about and how you guys got started and what your big vision is.
Yeah, okay. Well, Liftango started like a good joke. This comes up quite a bit. So the 3 founders, there's myself, I'm Welsh, there's Kevin, who's Scottish, and there's Alex, who's a Frenchman. So it's the classic case of a Welshman, Scotsman, and a Frenchman walk into a bar and come out with an idea. And it was literally like that kind of obvious. So initially, the focus of the business was around carpooling. So that's where we started. Looking around, Kevin Orr, who's the main founder who sort of started the program, was driving his wife to and from the hospital and looking around at everyone else in the traffic jam around them going, everyone else is going to the same destination, yet there's only one person in each of these cars. And so it was that realization, there's all this latent capacity in the cars on the roads. Why can't we do something about it? Technology exists to do this. And so it all stemmed from that. And then Kev went through the accelerator program with the Slingshot guys. So they ran this program with the NRMA as a sponsor, and that's kind of where the idea built legs and then built some initial tech. And then myself and Alex came on board and took it to the next level, and it's sort of grown from there, really. That was the origin story anyway.
Fantastic.
And what's the other part of the question? What is our mission?
What's your big vision?
So we believe in a world without traffic. Our view is there's this potential in all those cars and vehicles that are on the roads, and we build technology platforms that unlocks that, whether it be in my private car going to and from work, or in a bus that's running around empty around the back of the suburbs because it's not routing effectively. So we build technology platforms and programs that fit around the outside of that to unlock that latent capacity and bring it back in and make it useful. One of the things that we always talk about at the conference is, the 4 pillars of mobility in the future: connected, autonomous, electric, and shared. There's all this fancy stuff going on around connected and autonomous, but our view is shared is crucial. We've got to get that right now so that we can build for the future. Yeah.
And carpooling, it makes sense, right? Like, I guess most people who own a car and they drive and they see, there's only one person in each vehicle. I'm involved with car sharing business Car Next Door. Ashamedly, I do drive, on my own to drive to work each day. I do like driving, but I would actually prefer to carpool.
Yeah.
So why has carpooling not been that successful to date, and how are you guys doing it differently?
Yeah, it's really hard to get people to share their trips. It's really, really hard. And the reason is we have this inbuilt relationship with our car. It's my personal space. It's my own little area. So I think the reality is what we've tried and tested. We now have 50 clients across, various clients across business parks and universities and hospitals. With each of those, we've learned a bit about how you get people to do that. And the reality is the technology does only a certain amount. It's all the stuff around the outside that makes the big difference. So how you incentivize, how you market, what are the rewards you're going to put on the table for people to make that choice. So that's what we've been learning about, is how we get that whole model right. And the technology is the enabling part of it, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. And so, how did you get started in this? What were you doing prior to this that led you to success?
Nothing as interesting. I'm a failed engineer. I did engineering, mechanical engineering background, was rubbish at it, went into aerospace for a while, hated the slow pace of an aerospace business. Sorry to all those people that work in aerospace, but it sucks. And then moved into management consulting when I came out to Australia, and spent a lot of time working around different businesses and helping them fix problems and so on. So I've always had that kind of problem-solving mentality going on. And then Kevin reached out when I'd moved to France to do some contract work with Airbus, and he was like, hey, do you want to do this thing? And it sounded really exciting because I was back in aerospace again. So it was really just a massive difference from what I was doing before, but a lot of the same underlying kind of fundamental things about how do you look at business and how do you make it work and how do you solve problems and stuff. So it was dragged into it by Kev, but I had, I was excited by the proposition of getting into a startup.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
And what sort of scale has the business got to? You mentioned you've got 50 customers now.
Yep. 50 carpool customers, 4 live carpool on-demand bus programs. We've got an autonomous vehicle version of an on-demand bus program coming very soon in March in Dubbo, of all places.
Yeah, right. So what does that involve?
So that's an on-demand bus service, but where the bus is autonomous vehicle. So we're overlaying our on-demand booking system into a world where the driver shouldn't exist in the future. And so trying to unpick how the user experience changes, how the ticketing changes, all that sort of stuff that we need to unpack. Yeah.
So instead of putting the trams in the Sydney CBD, they should have just put an autonomous bus?
Totally. A few more of those, or trackless trams, or whatever.
Might have been a bit faster as well.
Bit quicker to market.
And save a few billion.
Let's not talk about that. I think we're 100% agreed on that. Yeah. Yeah, no, and so I guess one of our visions is that exact thing. How can we change people's perspective of public transport by changing the user experience? It's always been the option of last resort. I'll only get the bus if my car doesn't work or if it's in the garage.
Yeah.
But that's because the user experience is rubbish on buses. And timetables have been fixed and routes have been fixed because technology wasn't around to do that. Well, now the tech's here, we can actually bring an Uber-style experience to a bus, and that's what we're doing.
Yeah, awesome. And so the types of customers that you're going after, is it all government or?
It's a mix. Yeah, so we have some partnerships with corporates that do a lot for on-demand bus. We have typically we do the tech, and then we have a bus partner that does the operations, and then there's a government or some kind of transit agency that does the service provision stuff. So we are B2B, but we have a bit of a B2B to C flavour because we sell to clients that then have to market, and we get involved in that marketing to the customers as well. Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Can you share some stories with us about how commuters are leveraging Liftango to minimise their carbon footprint and to manage their commute?
Yeah. So on Carpooling, it's an interesting one. Universities are a great example of this deployment working. So they're hitting, anything up to 250, 300 carpool trips a day, which is 300 cars eliminated from their parking spaces. And that translates into a significant saving in carbon, CO2. So this year alone, we've saved, I think, 2.5 million kilometres of road travel, and that's equate to about 800,000 kilograms of CO2, which for us is pretty exciting. There are different motivations for different clients, but some of them are focused on CO2 and some of them are focused on the travel aspect. And I think on the on-demand bus side, people generally, when they start to get involved with using an on-demand service, anecdotally they tell us, I just sell my second car. I don't need it anymore, right? I've got this service that does everything I need it to. So that's typically what happens. People get involved, they use the service, and they go, do you know what? I'm going to become a one-car family instead of two. And so that to us is success, where people are changing their behaviour towards using a socially responsible form of transport.
How much capital have you raised to date? Are you looking to raise more capital? There might be some investors listening, some VCs.
Yeah.
And who's your perfect investor? Who have you got on your cap table?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we've raised just under 4, so 3.8, I think it is at the moment, million Aussie up until this stage. Initial sort of seed round. And before that, the accelerator program brought with it a small amount. But the latest round, which is about 10 months ago, that was the exciting one. That was the one that was most complex. Kev led the process, and we all sort of chipped in and supported the way through it. And so we brought on board Transdev as a corporate partner, and Transdev Australasia, a great partnership to have. They've invested, so they're backing us in terms of what our tech does. Previously to that, we had a few corporates come on board and a few angels come on board in the previous round. So GUD, which is a tier 2 automotive supplier out of Melbourne, they've been great. So what's ideal for us is if we get someone that comes in that brings more than just dollars. I know that's a cliche, but for us that's been huge. Transdev bring partnerships, bring advice, bring overseas knowledge that we can leverage. And just like when you're playing with big players, you need to have that name on your side. So that's been massive for us.
How did you get Transdev on board?
Yeah, it was a case, as often is the way, I think, of really good timing coupled with lots of energy on our side. And so we met them at a conference. So we spent a lot of time getting buy one, get one free, or buying one ticket for 3 of us in conferences and getting in and then just hustling to meet. And we've met a few people.
So did you know like the person you had to go and target, or you
no,
just
not really.
bumped
So
into them? Or?
We always have, we've had and this is one thing we always talk about. We have a list of people that we want to meet next, or we want to have conversations with. We're like, from our position, we have corporate partners that we need, like a vehicle manufacturer, an OEM, a bus operations partner, an infrastructure development, a financier. So we've had this list and we've had names against them. And at this conference, Transdev was on the list, and we saw there was a guy that we met, had a really good chat with. He's French. We spoke French, and there's a bit of a bonding thing going on. And we it turned into a couple of pitches, and from there it sort of turned into the investment. But we didn't necessarily go, right, we're going to speak to that organization and we're going to hunt them down. We had a list. Whenever they came up in any kind of organization or any kind of interaction, we just went really hard at trying to turn it into a positive interaction and finding where the value was. Cool. Yeah.
And how long did that process take from that first meeting to getting a deal done?
Too long, mate. It took. Yeah. So Transdev, a French company, and Australia has this foreign investment review process, FIRB. So it was planned to take 30 or 40 days. It took about 3 months. It's just one of those things, So we spent a lot of time trying to get Transdev Group comfortable with the valuation of the company. I have to be careful what I say here because there's some stuff going backwards and forwards during that process. But that was the most complicated. We're dealing with a big corporate investing, a good portion of that raise was getting their group headquarters as well as the local guys all on board with the terms, with the valuation, with, because there was a couple of things attached to it around exclusivity and contract pricing and all those sorts of things, because they wanted access to our technology. Yeah. So it was a perfect scenario for us because we had an operations partner and we had a dance partner for projects in the future. But yeah, it was hard. It took a lot longer than we expected.
And did you find your legal team sort of helped you with negotiations? Was that important?
Yeah. So we have a guy, also Newcastle, who's been through this quite a few times before. Like crucial having that person that knows the pitfalls for us young players. He was sensational. And actually, a couple of our investors from the first round helped, having been through it before themselves. They're sort of angels who've done it before. And that was really useful to be able to draw on them and sound things out. And also the Slingshot team. So they've always been quite useful to bounce ideas around about, hey guys, what do you think about this? And sort of Kevin's been liaising quite a lot with that team. So you need those people for sure to get through that.
Excellent.
Yeah.
This podcast is sponsored by Parkhound, Australia's parking marketplace, to find a convenient parking space near your home or office.
Post-investment, what's it like having a corporate on your register and presumably on your board?
Yeah.
How's that been managing that
we have
dynamic?
To wear smarter shirts to the board now.
No more T-shirts?
No more T-shirts,
okay.
Yeah.
Can live with that?
Yeah, we can deal with that because it brings a lot of positives. So we're leveraging the strengths that they bring. For sure, it does change the dynamic a little bit, but if you keep the structure of your board right, you can get the balance between, and you have to be sort of especially conscious of what that corporate investor wants from you and how you structure it so that you don't end up just being a resource that they'll use for something. Liftango has ambitions beyond just this raise and beyond just a partnership with Transdev. Sorry, Transdev, if you're listening. But the reality is that, so you have to be aware of that and have enough people on your side so you can balance it so everyone gets what they want without constraining your business. And that was a tricky process to go through.
Alignment
and just preventing unnecessary barriers to your own growth in the future by getting hungry and getting white line fever for what's the deal that's on the table for that raise in front of you, I guess.
Yeah, makes sense. And what does your board sort of look like today?
5 of us.
Okay.
A couple of founders, a couple of corporates, and then one angel.
Okay.
So no, we don't have we have an informal advisory board. We're working. Each of the founders has their own little mini advisory network, but we have the main board is made up of a mix between ourselves and I think we've got the balance right. We were able to get through things quickly. There's no complexity yet. Again, if you're listening, Transdev, take note of that. David, it's been great. You got to get the balance right, and then you're okay.
Yeah, okay. And how often do you meet as a board?
Quarterly. Yeah, we have updates in the meantime. And actually, we spend a lot of time, one of the board members is our lead contact at Transdev, so we spend a lot of time talking with them about, project updates and the projects we're working on together. So there's a lot of informal stuff that goes on around those, but formally, quarterly.
Yeah, cool. Excellent.
Yeah.
And so talk to me about sort of how you go about getting your customers. Like, what does the business development sort of look like, and what have you set up from a marketing channels?
Yeah, so we have an absolute gun, JJ, who looks after the marketing stuff. So website, all those nurturing campaigns and that sort of thing. And then on the other side, because we're heavily B2B, we've got quite a narrow segment of who we're going after. We're not open up to the world. So our version is we're sniper marketing essentially. So we're targeting very specific people in very specific organizations and putting our dollars towards them. We do a lot of conferences, to be honest. Conferences we found maybe it's because we're easy to get on with, or because our clients are actually in the market looking for solutions to the problem. So they're at these places looking for things they can use to help solve their problems. So we found that's been a really useful channel. And that's where over the last couple of years, we've gotten the majority of our clients is through making a connection and turning it into a project from that point. Increasingly, however, over the last 6 to 12 months, we've seen a lot more organic leads coming through website, coming through marketing channels. So it's been, 70-30, and now it's going the other way.
And so what would you say is the most successful sort of marketing channel?
Historically, it's been that face-to-face, going to conferences, so the self-selecting approach of going and speaking at a conference. You're speaking to 500, 800 people who have already self-selected because they're at the event, and they self-select further because they like your face and they like the way you chat and they like your product. They'll come and talk to you afterwards, and so you save a lot of time having just random conversations. So that's been really valuable. And I think over the next 6 to 12 months, some of the more targeted LinkedIn campaigns we're doing to specific segments, to specific areas and specific geographies, to specific role types, we'll start to, it's already starting to show that difference. So you asked me in about 6 months' time, it'll probably be the other way around, I reckon.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
And so how big's your team, and sort of how have you gone about sort of building your culture and making sure that sort of works really well?
Yeah, last year's been crazy. We've gone from, I think we went from 10 to 20, which doesn't sound like a lot to people who have big businesses, but for a doubling in size in the matter of months is pretty quick. We're really lucky. We're in Newey. There's a good pool of people. We were talking about this before. There's university provides a great pool of talent in tech, and we've got really lucky in bringing those young guys in who are hungry, who are keen, who are smart, way smarter than us, and that's been really useful. So we've been quite careful about who comes in, and if we're honest, we've had a few that haven't, like the culture hasn't quite worked out with. So, it's been a combination of selecting appropriately and hiring locally in Newcastle. And that's the strategy for at least the next year, 2 years, is to keep that core team culture together in one location. And I think that's pretty important, especially if when you're moving as quickly as we are at this stage, having everyone in the room to have those immediate conversations and go, guys, let's just gather around and talk about this for 5 minutes, and you get that interaction. It's really hard if everyone's spaced out. That may come, but initially the core team will be in Newcastle, and keeping that culture set is pretty key for us. Yeah.
So what have been some of the least effective ways to grow your business? What hasn't worked? Often the feedback we get from founders is, you're telling us too many good stories.
Yeah.
There's lots of highs and lows. Yeah. Tell us some of the lows.
Yeah, least effective. So actually, interestingly, we started initially. Someone gave us some advice to get some rainmakers. You need some rainmakers on board. Get some contracts signed up with people who know everyone, who've got Rolodexes full of people. Hasn't led to much at all, to be honest. It's helped out where we've had an initial contact, and then one of our investors has said, "Hey, I know that person. I'll have a chat, grease the wheels." But finding consultants, contractors, well-connected people, and getting them on a referral deal, for some reason, hasn't worked for us. And maybe there's not enough alignment of goals. So yeah, be skeptical of that one for sure, and I will be ongoing. So that's one for sure. Yeah, that's probably the main one that jumps to mind in terms of like sales channels.
Yeah, or any sort of mistakes made, I suppose. Yeah,
Plenty of those.
Haven't we all?
I think the mistake we always make, and it's really hard to counter, is not saying no. So saying yes to too many things. Like, you can go to your board and say, hey, look, there's all these opportunities out there. There's no shortage of ideas and opportunities that look great on paper. Where we've made mistakes in the past is not saying we're saying yes to things that actually aren't quite as aligned to our project. Revenue's on the table. Oh, it looks exciting. Let's give it a crack. It's kind of aligned, and then you end up diverting your resource for a while and then dilute your core. So like sticking to your core product we've learned that lesson a little bit, and we've refocused a bit. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
And so leading on from that, what have been some of the hairy moments in the business? I guess we've all had them. It's roller coaster day to day.
How hairy do you want?
As hairy as they come. Yeah, absolutely.
The humdinger was we were sitting.
And how did you get through it?
Yeah. Am I allowed to say alcohol? Like, there was a lot of stuff. Like, at the time we were going through the raise. Transdev was the lead investor. Lots of the other investors were hanging on a response from the Australian government saying, like, can Transdev take the stake? So foreign investment looks at investments coming in from overseas and says, can this be allowed? Is this too critical to infrastructure and all that sort of stuff? And we were looking at ourselves going, hang on, we're a small technology startup based out of Newcastle. Sure, we do technology, but why are these guys getting involved? These guys normally look at huge acquisitions between energy sector, players. And anyway, we had to go through the process, and it extended way beyond what anyone expected it to. And keeping the other investors who are already committed as committed as they were. Investors have lots of deals coming over their tables. They've got free capital ready to go. They free it up by exiting something, or so we were aware that there was this pressure from the other investors who'd committed but didn't have as long a time frame as we perhaps had, and that was probably the worst, because if one or two of the investors had said, hey, this is taking too long, I'm out, all of a sudden, what do you do there? Like, how do you fill that gap when you've got some negative energy? Like, momentum is important when you're raising, and if you start to lose that at any point, it would be negatively infectious. So, Kev was working really hard to keep everyone comfortable and going, it's okay, it's coming, and it was over the Christmas break. And so we got together over the Christmas break, the founders, and spent a lot of time in the office just like letting out a lot of steam, just getting really frustrated, because it was, it's your future and it's being held up in some bureaucratic process, and you're in danger of losing it all. So
crazy.
It was wild.
How did they get involved, and like how did that happen?
FIRB?
Yeah,
I think it's just it's one of the conditions of an investment from an overseas body, and the Transdev local entity has the French arm owns it, right? So that's where it came from. I think there was a couple of conditions. It was over a certain amount, and we fitted into one of the gazetted industries that had to have a FIRB review on it. We got lots of advice from people that said, yeah, it'll be fine. They'll tick the box, take 30 days, relax. And so when the answer came back, no, this is going on for longer than expected, and they wanted more clarifications, we were drinking more and more scotch and getting more and more worried about it every week. And it went over Christmas, and everyone really enjoyed Christmas. And then we came back in January, and on the night when the decision was being made, we all got into the office, and it was a stinking hot day, and it just had when the answer came through, it just got wild. It was just like that release of pressure was just insane. Yeah.
Party time.
Yeah. It was heavy. Yeah. It's just, I think dealing with the stress of the dichotomy of the situation. If it comes back positive, here we go again. Roller coaster ride, excitement, another 2 years. If it comes back negative, geez, like,
yeah, what next?
What next? And how do you tell everyone? How do you bounce back from that? There's not many, well, not that I've experienced, there's not many moments in life where you have such a big fork in the road moment, where you have to contemplate two horrific outcomes, both of which are, Schrodinger's cat, don't open the box, and both are there. But
crazy.
Yeah, so that was, everyone's been through it. You guys obviously been through it, but it's heavy.
Yeah, excellent. And so looking back, what sort of like critical things that you've done, or things that have happened that have led to your success?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think,
or is it lots of things?
Yeah, so many things, mate. Yeah, I think one of them though is building so the three co-founders, and JJ's we consider him a co-founder, so let's say four, spending enough time together to make sure you're all completely aligned on what you're doing is crucial, because Alex looks after the engineering team, I look after sales and business development, Kev looks after governance and raising, and JJ the marketing element. So that's kind of how we split it. And we've all got kids, all the same age. We're all getting pressure if we're not home at 5:30 to put the kids down. We all get back online again later on to do work and stuff. So it's really hard to find the time to go, let's just make sure we get together regularly enough outside of the daily grind to go check in. Is everyone cool with where we're going and how it's tracking? So I think that's been good that we've allocated enough time to do that, because it's tempting not to, and you can all drift off.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's one. I think selecting the right investors was another big one. So again, Kev worked really hard during that last raise, and we all got involved, but Kev was sort of leading the charge there to find the right people. So people that would understand what we're about and not divert attention too much, and bring value beyond the dollars. That's been huge, because they've really helped. And it's tempting to just go, well, let's just take some dumb money, let's get more dumb money in, and you end up with a registry that's messy and everything, and everything gets too complex. So that's another one. How many do you want? I've got like 25.
Keep going.
Being in Newcastle, it's great. Like, it's the best place to be. We tell big clients we're based in Sydney,
Yeah.
but actually being in Newcastle, because you're a founder, you're giving up a lot of revenue, of salary potential to do it. We all stop working for a long period of time. So if you can give your family some kind of stability and some kind of lifestyle that seems sustainable while you're doing it, they're a big part of any founder's journey. So if you're putting your family through something that's not sustainable, you're putting yourself under a lot more pressure. So being in Newcastle was a decision, and we moved a couple of the engineering guys up early on, and I think that's been a crucial one. You can stretch your dollars a lot more. You get more space for the office. It's cheaper to live, all that sort of stuff. So that's been a big one for us too.
Yeah, cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
And on a day-to-day basis, is there particular KPIs that you're looking at sort of in terms of monitoring the performance of the business?
Yeah. Shared trips. So our North Star is how many shared trips are we coordinating? And so we watch that closely. Coming through next is CO2. So how much CO2 are we saving? So all those trips that are shared is assume there's a car off the road. And so we measure that. And for on-demand bus, there's a bunch of metrics, but the key one is the sort of cost per trip. So how are we stacking up against a regular bus service? How much does that cost per trip, and how does an on-demand service measure up? Ultimately, the world is driven by cash in that way. So that's the kind of...
What is the differential, roughly?
Well, in certain situations, you can get it to parity, but it has to be built into a network. For most of the on-demand trials that are running around Sydney, they're significantly above a cost per trip, but that's kind of skewed by the fact that when you look at the cost of a fixed bus route, it's amortized across 7,000 buses running day in, day out, and during peak, they're flat, they're chockers, and then off peak, they're empty. Whereas in on-demand, you're only looking at 4 vehicles, 5 vehicles in one zone. So I think, Transport New South Wales has showed that it's possible to get cost neutral. So you take out a fixed bus and you bring in an on-demand bus, and the cost is equivalent, but the patronage can go up because you got a better experience. That's the underlying economic balance that needs to go through. But there's complexity in how you make that happen in bus contracts and on public transport spheres. Everyone gets worried as soon as you start talking about changing bus timetables.
Yeah.
That's my bus.
Don't move my cheese.
Yeah, don't move my cheese. Exactly. Is it harumph? Yeah.
And how soon do you think it'll be until we start seeing sort of autonomous buses?
March, Dubbo, get out there. There'll be one there in March with the Liftango, NRMA, and bus lines on the side. No,
and will that be like fully running with cars at the same time?
It's an on the road, so yeah, it's kind of tongue in cheek. So what's happening at the moment is the agencies are funding trials in order to force legislation, insurance, all those frameworks to deal with the fact that this is coming. And so that's where we're at the moment. We're still forcing trials through, and they're not really solving transport problems, they're solving legislative problems. So that will wash through over the next 2-5 years, and Evan Walker at the Smart Innovation Centre Transport are doing great work there, and we're part of that. I think adoption of the next place it will be within closed campuses and that sort of stuff. You can get a lot more control. The debate rages 5 to 10 years for that kind of context. In a city, 10 to 30. You can be vague about exactly what it looks like, but I think everyone can agree it's coming. It's just the time frame that everyone disagrees on. And our view is you can start doing it with driver buses with drivers in, and prepare everyone for the future and understand how this, and what we're doing is we're understanding how the systems, the booking, the ticketing, the onboarding, all that sort of stuff is going to work in future. So we're positioned for it when public adoption comes through, when the guidance systems get up to spec. So it can never be soon enough for us, but the story is it's coming, and it's just a matter of how quick we get there. Yeah.
Awesome.
What do you think?
Look, I mean, I can't wait for it to happen.
Oh,
Like,
insane.
yeah. And you're seeing around the world sort of the particular governments sort of more active in sort of pushing this faster?
Yeah. We get a bit of exposure to the US, to the UK, Southeast Asia. I think Australia's done amazing things. New South Wales in particular have done amazing things through the on-demand trial, and they've copped a lot of flack for it, to be honest, because this sort of thing isn't cost effective from day one. You've got to invest. So New South Wales has been a hotbed, and actually overseas agencies have been coming to Sydney to see what they're doing in on-demand and autonomous vehicles. So that's great, but they're focusing, quite heavily on the on-demand space. I think autonomous vehicles, obviously the US have opened up a lot of their restrictions and a lot of their test beds. The UK is doing some great stuff in the Midlands, and they're putting a lot of money behind it in 2020 onwards. So there's a bit of a race, to be honest, to be relevant in that space and to be driving those things, which is great. But I think Australia can be proud of what's happening in New South Wales and starting to happen in the other states. So that's a positive, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
We're kind of in the mix of it.
Yeah.
And actually, we probably wouldn't exist if New South Wales government hadn't been going through this change right now. So, we can owe a bit of that to the effort that they're putting in now.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So what's next for Liftango? What does the business look like 5 years from today?
Hopefully we've still got, so there's a few parts to that. One is global domination. We all say that, let's take over the world. But translate that into reality. It'll mean contracts in the US. It'll mean a bigger team in the US delivering local. Reason the US was because access to capital, access to higher valuations, access to mobility focused funds is really good over there. Australia's been great for us up until now, but the reality is to raise the next round at the valuation we're looking at, we're probably going to have to be there. So we have to support that with contracts. Anyone that says they're going to raise in the US off a customer revenue story in Australia is kidding themselves. So that's key. And we've got a great guy, Jacob Grieg, who's over there now setting that process up, and Kev will head over and join him in the next few months. So that's one, North America. Then we'll rationalize in Southeast Asia and Europe. Reason being, we need a position in those areas because the growth in those areas is going to be huge. So we need to position there. And I think in 5 years' time, we'll have probably raised again. The team would probably have doubled in size again. We'll probably had the same big night in the office when the decision came through. There'll be just as much stress. And it's funny when you look back at coming from, it's funny, isn't it? Getting reflecting on something from a few years back. We've been around for 4 or 5 years now, but you look back at the transition from 2 people, 3 people to 7, and I think it was almost as stressful as the transition from 10 to 20. So I think the same stresses, the same strains apply, just the numbers slightly different. And I think, it's going to be interesting to see how that translates into the next 20 to 40, 20 to 50 to 200 kind of thing. I'm hoping that you learn as you go and you grow as you, personally as a founder, you grow as you go. So you kind of deal with that extra scale by using what you've learned from the last growth thing. That sounds a bit hippie and.
I think that's right. I think we all learn as you evolve.
Yeah.
And so you just mentioned the stresses. What were the main sort of stresses? Was it the funding to have to pay all the staff, or was it?
Yeah. Well, we had a couple of those moments, but that was during the FIRB round, right? Because we budgeted for something and that wasn't happening, so that was stressful. And we found ways around that. We scrambled for revenue and stuff, so that was stress for sure. But I think beyond the raise crunch points, which are always bad, the growth part of going from 5 guys who just sit in a room like this and go, hey mate, can you just do this, or can you just, and you kind of operate like a rugby team that knows exactly what the person next to you is going to do when you do something, to then going to 10, 20 people where you have to go, all right, I'm no longer going to do a bit of everything. I'm going to hand over this to you and trust that you're doing it, and I'm going to do that. So that's taken some time to get right. Sort of organizing from being everyone does everything to okay, let's focus, and then you have to get the interactions between those groups right, and that's pretty tricky. And then positioning for scale, going from, hey, we can make this happen if there's only 2-4 clients, but how do we do it when there are 50, 60 clients at the same level of pace, and how do we then prepare for 200? That's been a constant challenge, and it's an exciting one, but it's tough.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's the evolution of as companies or startups grow. There's always lots of challenges. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us today, Trystan. It's been great hearing your story. I think there's lots of interesting stories there, so it's been really good.
Thank you. It's been great.
So that's all for now for Founders on Air, and in the coming weeks we'll have a few more episodes coming. So thanks, everyone.
You've been listening to Founders on Air with Steve Orenstein and Mike Rosenbaum, a podcast designed for founders by founders to help you scale your business. For show notes and to ask questions for future episodes, go to foundersonair.com. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe. We'll see you next time.